I want to talk about where does this leave us with the legacies of these four OpTic players now. Like I mentioned at the very top of the show, Kenny and Shotzzy are both now multi-time world champions. And now Dashy and Pred, two players that have been maligned quite a bit, especially Pred lately, Dashy for years at this point.
Yeah.
Two players that have been maligned. They are now world champions and were a big part of OpTic getting to this point, turning it around after such a bad performance. So where do you see specifically Kenny and Shotzzy all time now as multiple time world champions? And Kenny, he made it to his fourth champs grand finals of his career. He TK in 2018, I believe, lost to
Mhm.
EG.
Yep.
2019 with 100 Thieves, and then of course won in 21 with LAT, and now 2024 with OpTic Texas. So where does this leave us with the legacies of these four players?
Did you see JCap's tweet about Kenny after the event?
Yes, he's undefeated in champs grand finals when his teammates have all their thumbs.
Shout out Enable. That was possibly one of the funniest tweets I've ever seen. And when you were just listing the teams there, it reminded me of it. But yeah, in all seriousness, I think, we really, as a community and even just you and me in conversations, like we fixate on like a top 10 all time for COD. Like
Yeah.
it feels like top 5 is kind of locked up, at least for now, especially because guys like Simp and Abizi didn't get a third ring. Um, and like 4 of the 5 spots in the top 5 are really like solidified in like Clay, Scump, Crim, and Karma. The 5th spot I feel like is always up for debate. Um, and then like the 6 through 10 spots are really like those guys who have 2 rings.
Yeah.
And it's like Arcity, Simp, Abizi, JCap, Apathy, Slasher, Aches. Like that's always been the thing with that like second half of the top 10.
Hmm.
And now with Kenny and Shotzzy, that just adds on to the list of players with 2 rings, and it makes it a little harder to have that be like the defining characteristic, if you will, for getting that spot. Like if there are what I rattled off like 8 names there of guys with 2 rings. Like if that number continues to go up and there's only 5 spots in the quote unquote top 10, you got to start looking at other stuff. And
Hmm.
as of now, for me personally, there are guys like Aches and JCap and Slasher and guys who just have more overall championships because of the system they played in previously. Whereas guys like even Simp, Abizi, Shotzzy, and Kenny now, they don't play in as many tournaments as some of those older vets. So they're potentially never going to have as many championships
Hmm.
overall as them. So it really makes it tough for me personally, and I haven't really put a lot of thought into it. But I guess it's sort of a cop out answer, but I just think they definitely enter that conversation or consideration for like a top 15 spot, potentially teetering in top 10. Um, it's just I don't think it's something that is going to change drastically right now, but we have the same conversation next year. They get a third ring, then yeah, that drastically shifts the conversation, right? We would even be having this conversation right now if New York won and Hydra had a second ring. Like,
Hmm.
where would that put Hydra in the top 10 conversation? If Atlanta obviously won Simp and Appease, he getting a third, we're sitting here like, okay, like are they top 5 now?
And
Like,
where's Cell at that
so
point too? So
Cell would have 2, yeah. So it's like it's tough, and I don't have a really good answer, and I don't want to take up too much time just trying to think of it. But I named off a couple of really solid players and strong names in Call of Duty history. Did I even say Arcides for someone with 2 rings?
yeah, you
Shout
did.
out Arcides,
Two and a
won
half
Challengers
now.
champs today. Yeah, so 2.5 for him technically. Um, but yeah, so there's a lot of guys with 2 rings now, and we're gonna have to start if we want to continue the narrative of like looking to do a top 10. Um, I think we're gonna have to look at those guys with 2 rings and start figuring out what else separates them from one another.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's hard in the moment to avoid like that recency bias and think, man, like Kenny has had such an impact on 4 different teams now to get to Champs Grand Finals, 2 of them to win it. But and you could say the same thing about Shotzzy. Shotzzy was a rookie when he won his first world championship,
Yeah.
and he's had like the peaks and valleys since then. Of course, Aches has been saying that he's not a superstar for the last year or 2 years, and he wins champs MVP this time around when he didn't win champs MVP in 2020 when the Empire won it. So it's one of those things that it's amazing. Like it really, like I remember being in Columbus when we watched EG win, and that felt like such a monumental moment in Call of Duty esports history because you had someone like Aches, or 2 guys like Aches and Apathy, who are winning their second ring, solidifying their legacies, and really like taking a complete step up in like that all-time ranking, or however you want to put it. They were kind of in a different class than they were before that event. But the same could be said for someone like Silly and Assault, 2 players that had literally never won a champion, like a world championship before, and they got to enter that club. They got to get past the bouncer and be a part of that world championship club. And now we have someone like Dashy and someone like Pred, 2 players that have probably, like, those players needed it more than anyone. I felt like in that top 4 group to really win a championship, because I felt like a roster change could be coming down the line or this off season if they didn't get there. So what do you think about those guys in particular, Dashy and Pred?
I'll take it a step further with Pred. I think Dashy definitely did. He needed it. There was like a graphic before the tournament, I believe, of like champs appearances or something like that, and Dashy had like the most out of anybody currently competing, because we remember he was at it was IW champs with Straight Rippin
Oh
when
yeah, yeah.
him and Temp were the duo. Um, but what was it? For Pred, I mean, this is potentially like a opportunity, massive opportunity for just the APAC region as a whole, right?
Yeah.
We go from just 2 years ago not having any European world champions. We get Hydra, the first European world champion last year, and now Pred, the first APAC region world champion this year. Like, it's massive for, and I do think Pred is more of the exception than like the
Yeah, of
standard in
course.
terms of APAC, what you would expect from a prospect out of there. But it could open up even more opportunities for that region now in terms of scouting and
Yeah.
looking for the next quote unquote Pred. So it's massive. He's still young, so it's not like I don't think it was like this like make or break moment in his career. Now he's definitely, as you've highlighted this episode and a couple episodes leading up to this too, he's definitely been getting really criticized by the community at large. And we've talked a lot about the green wall and you ain't first, you're last, that whole mentality and stuff. When OpTic was struggling, they're going to look for somebody to blame. It felt like a lot of the criticism was falling on Pred, at least from the outside looking in. And now he's able to, get this champs win. This is something he, now you'll never hear the end of this. And like you want to talk shit to Pred, he's just gonna be like, yeah, I'm a world champ. It doesn't matter. But yeah, I mean, he also just the way they did it too. I mean, according to Breaking Point, if I remember correctly, it was Shotzzy had the highest KD in the tournament with a 1.27, and Pred was right behind him at number 2 with a 1.24. So it's like, all those people saying he lays down too much or whatever the criticism was, like he was putting up the numbers in the biggest moments, helped OpTic, get their second world championship as an organization. He lives in Call of Duty immortality, basically.